right now in the Muslim world, there's a phenomenon of excommunication, so to speak, cancel culture when it comes to canceling scholars. Um, I'm wondering, where does this lie in our tradition where is it okay to cancel scholars, and is it a part of our tradition to do so?
It's really interesting and tricky when you're comparing concepts across languages, because sometimes things have connotations that exist in one language but not in the other, right? So when it comes to like, is this particular practice or is this particular concept Islamic or not, does it adhere to Islamic guidance? It's usually, I think, a good method to go back to Islam in Arabic and see, are there any potential parallels, right? And then are there any, okay, there might be some points of convergence, but then there might also be points of divergence as well, right? So, if we look at the way that, say, innovators or Zanadiqa, like egregious innovators, or even, apostates, like how should they be treated or how were they treated at the time of the Prophet, at the time of the companions, at the time of the Salaf, right? What are all the tactics that are sort of on the table, right? And then how limited are we to those tactics? That's the second question. And then what type of factors are going to affect our calculus of when to use which tactics? So you do find hajr, right? You do find the practice of abandonment, right? Or boycotting. It's often translated as boycotting. It is a tactic among tactics, right? It's on the table. So the next question is, okay, is that the same as canceling somebody? I'm not so sure that it is. Is it something that's ta'abbudi, or is something mu'allal? Is it something that we do, just come hell or high water, we're just, this is what we're doing, this is our tradition, and that's what we do in this situation? No, it's not. It's something that is mu'allal. That's something that has to serve and bend, right? It's something that is a tactic that's deployed to achieve a certain result, right? And so that's important, an important distinction, because now we have to have that conversation. What result is it achieving? When the Salaf deployed this concept among people, and if we try to deploy the same concept now, is it going to achieve the same results? Or are the results so different and divergent that it doesn't even make sense to use that tactic in certain circumstances? And actually, Sheikh al-Albani, of all people, wrote about this, right? Or at least spoke about it, right? And that the tactic of boycotting, it doesn't apply to a situation where the person is not going to be affected by boycott. Right. And there's limits to that, but just for an entry sort of point to the discussion, what's going to happen if we abandon someone completely? Now, we have to get into the granular detail of what does it mean to abandon someone. Abandoning someone doesn't mean the same as deplatforming somebody, I don't think, right? Because if somebody, let's make it real. Okay, some speaker is exposed as a fraud. Okay, right? Their credentials are whack. They didn't study with who they said they were going to study with, or who they said they studied with. They abuse their position, right? Either for some sort of gain. Okay, that's really, really sinful behavior. Okay, that has to be exposed to a certain extent, and it can be argued to what extent it has to be exposed, and scholars differ about that, in order to stop the harm. Right? Because the ultimate maqsad, or the ultimate goal of whatever tactic we choose, is to stop the harm. Okay. However, there's a fundamental sort of aqeedah question here as well. That is that person ever redeemable? And the answer is yes. That's actually an important, important ingredient within Islam that differs it from cancel culture, right? Because the cancel culture that we see online, at least in the Western sphere, that is that the non-Muslims are practicing, are basically I can take anything from anything that you've ever done and use that to completely tar and feather you, and there's no coming back, right? That's not Islam, right? Because anybody can come back if they go through the steps to come back, right? So it doesn't just mean that we're naive. It doesn't mean that we just turn the other way and overlook things. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about if somebody writes themselves, they repents to Allah, they're remorseful, they go through a process of self-rectification, and they come back in the spirit of trying to mend their wrongs and the things that they did, then we should welcome that person and help them to that end. And honestly, the loyalty that Islam demands Muslims to have to other Muslims demands that we have that amount of loyalty to that person. There were companions that all the companions started out as kuffar, right? And then some of them Obviously, we know the ones who converted right away. Some of them didn't. Some of them fought against the Prophet ﷺ in battles, right? If they had the opportunity, like Khalid ibn al-Walid and like even Umar, right? Even though he converted before the battles, but there were points in their lives, if they had the opportunity to kill the Prophet ﷺ, they would have done so, right? And yet, how were they treated when they accepted Islam and they fixed themselves and they demonstrated their sincerity and they demonstrated that they had changed?
So there needs to be a demonstration of that, because the rising question on everyone's mind is how do we determine whether that person has really come back and had sincere tawbah to Allah, sincere repentance to Allah?
No, definitely. And I think that we can be doing a better job from a whole lot of different angles, right? So we need to do a better job vetting people. We don't really have any ways to vet people. And unfortunately, even big Islamic organizations will just choose to fill in speaker slots with like who has the most followers on a particular social media platform. That's wrong. That's just wrong, period. Right? We should have some sort of standardization of credentials when it comes to speaking. You know, we have it like, and it doesn't mean that everybody's at the same level. You have Colin Grads and Al Maqasid and Miftah, and you have other institutes. And if you graduate from that, it should mean something, right? And then if you graduate from Eshal or Medina or Faz or whatever, that it should mean something. And if you further than that, it should mean something. But we have to have some sort of vetting and some sort of standards where we don't just pass the mic to anybody who is popular, right? Who stirs the emotions of people. We know that we have statements in our tradition that warn against this sort of thing. That's just coming from one side. The other side is we need to have like suhbah and mentorship and accountability like on our individual levels, right? If you're like an individual speaker or scholar or something, I want to know who your scholars are, right? Like, and that's not like, I'm not trying to like introduce like a litmus test or be like, a gatekeeper. Like if we take it too far, it can become that. But just to be like, you have to be in an ecosystem of people that are keep you accountable, right? Who's going to call you out? Because we have, unfortunately, the phenomenon of some speakers, they just surround themselves with yes men and yes women, people that are also clout chasers, people that are also, oh yeah, I get to be like in the circle of the speaker and they're so popular and it's so cool. And I get to be backstage access. It's like, what is this? Like music industry? Come on. It's like, who are your teachers? Who's advising you? Who do you go to? And people should be able to answer that. Right? Like I can tell you right now, it's like the person that's closest to me is Sheikh Tahir. And like, if I have issues, I go to him. I also rely on Sheikh Yasser bin Jazz. I also rely on some other mashaykh that maybe are less well known. And I don't have any problem. I'm not trying to hide that. I don't care if you want to put me in this box or that box. You think that makes me something, whatever. I don't care. Like the point is that I'm accountable to somebody else, right? And like someone's going to hit me up on WhatsApp and be like, hey, look, you said this thing. I know maybe you didn't mean it, but you should not have said that. Or, it's like, hey, it's like, I see this. I'm really concerned. Like you should make this adjustment. You don't have anybody like that. It's just a matter of time. Shaitan's too smart.
Yeah.
Shaitan's too smart. He'll get you. Whether it's now, 3 months from now, 3 years from now, he'll get you at some point.
He's been doing it for a long time.
Doing it for a long time.
So in the scenario that you mentioned, the scholar lacked credentials, which is a very valid reason to remove a scholar if you can or his work. But
Right.
what if it's a personal life matter? What if we discover something about their personal life? Someone comes out and exposes them. Yeah. What do we do?
No, definitely. I'm glad you asked that too, because I did give a specific example, and there have to be levels to it. There have to be degrees, right? So, that's I kind of chose a particularly sort of egregious example that's easy. There are other examples, like, okay, someone's very well credentialed, but they have an ethical breach or an ethical transgression. Like that's a different type of scenario that might require a different sort of protocol. Or there are other scenarios where a person is credentialed, but they just have no filter or no sense of, let's say, wisdom. Like they expose doubts in the wrong places, right? Some things, this happens a lot, especially with social media. It's called context collapse, where there's some specialist discussions that you only have with like specialists in the field that if you were to take them to, YouTube and blast them out in front of everybody, like people go nuts. Like it looks really bad. So that's another type of sort of transgression. But specifically, there has to be, if somebody has an ethical transgression, then it does affect their standing, because, and this is actually really significant, especially as we live in a secular age one of the hallmarks of the secular age is that knowledge is separated from morality and ethics. So that's why you have these PhDs that study Arabic and the Quran and the Hadith, and yet they're not Muslims. Tell me how that works, right? That only is possible if you've structurally separated knowledge from ethics. It's just learning. It's just information, right? We don't believe in that. It's not like everything that you learn. Allahumma alimna ma yanfa'una wanfa'na bima 'allamtana wa zidna ilman. That the things that we learn are a sacred trust from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And there is a certain amount of ethical, there's a floor, right? There has to be some sort of baseline ethical, adherence and compliance to be respected as somebody who is worthy of carrying that knowledge, so that it's for you, not against you on the day of judgment. Anybody who studies, Islam in any capacities, the first day pep talks that your sheikh gives you, about sincerity, et cetera, et cetera. Now, it depends on people are people, and people will slip up, right? I think that Islamically, there always needs to be a path to redemption. And we should question ourselves if we're not willing to allow that path of redemption. And that's one thing that I'm concerned about when I see some of the vitriol that we see in the online Dawah sphere today, is that there seems to be an unspoken assumption that people can't come back often. Too often than is healthy, I think. And I think part of that is pent up frustration. And so that's understandable. I can let that slide.
Pent up from frustration, you think, from what?
Pent up for a couple things. So pent up frustration for the lack of standards that we've had up till this point, like when it comes to speakers, et cetera, et cetera. There's also, I think, some pent up frustration with some of the pandering that's going on. I think, we see that now with the phenomenon of red pill and red pill affected sort of Muslims. There's a huge pent up frustration about the Dawah scene pandering to feminism and female concerns, which is not to say that females and women didn't have real concerns. They did, right? However, what was the correct way of responding to those? Did we go down that route, or did we excessively sort of pander to what people wanted to hear, perhaps, right? Right. So there's pent up frustration when it comes to that. So some people are just out for blood, right? And the people who are out there, third level, some people they're compromised. They have conflict of interest because they're monetized, and part of the click game is scandal and slander, right? Which is a huge structural problem that we have in our Dawah as well. So those are different sort of factors. Some of them are more forgivable than others, right? But I do think that axiomatically, Islam provides the possibility that people can redeem themselves. And we should, every single one of us should say, or at least in their head, go through the exercise, what should a person do to redeem themselves in X scenario or Y scenario? If you can't answer that question and you come like there's nothing they can do, I think you've got a sickness in your heart. I think that's something that is, you've trespassed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, even for cases of murder and qisas and stuff like that, if you want more than the amount of retribution that's entitled to you, then you are a trespasser. You're a transgressor. You've gone past what's even your right, right? And so we have to be sensitive to that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, I think that so there are different types of ethical transgressions. We should be able to admit the theoretical possibility that people can come back, especially if people go through I don't know, some people need therapy. Some people, demonstrate that some things are mental illnesses or imbalances, or they have trauma or stuff like that. And so somebody just needs to get off the stage and go take care of themselves and stuff like that. We can make a likeness to if someone came out as they were a drug abuser or an alcoholic or something like that. It's if you put yourself in a 10-step program and you make certain lifestyle sort of changes, I can look at you and say, wow, that person's really trying. Even if they backslide, even if they have setbacks, right? Okay, that person is trying.
So what should we expect these scholars to do then as an ummah? Should we expect them to come out with a public apology? Should we expect them to, I don't know, grow their beard longer? How do we determine that they should be allowed to come back, that they're redeemable?
Well, that's an interesting thing too. And I think I'm glad the way you phrased that question, because one of the questions that your question is predicated upon is who's the we? Right. I don't think these things should be tried in the court of public opinion. I think that this has to be a point where we have some cohesion as al-hal wal-aqd, right? Like the movers and shakers, the people who are respected authorities in dawah, right? In the space. And if you're concerned about a certain sectarian dominance, then let's get people from all stripes. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, the point is that this is where we're talking about vetting people. I think this is another sort of similar thing, right? If we can have a body that is agreed upon by the vast majority of us to vet people and to structure sort of what it should look like to be a community leader or a speaker, what types of credentials you should have, we can also have a sort of similar thing where that group can counsel and evaluate and say whether this person has demonstrated that maybe their time to be replatformed, right? They're ready to kind of come back into the public light and withstand that. And this is all just brainstorming. Like, it's all open. Throw my statements against the wall. It's not revelation. This is stuff that we can debate about. But I think we need to have conversations at this level, and I think we do need to have organization in the community at this level. I think that we're like the Wild West at this point, where it's just like somebody does like some horrible, like egregious ethical breach, and they just pick up their stuff, go to another city, and then do the same thing all over again. Like, that's a problem. Like, we need to shore up things better than that.
Yeah, and a lot of people that I respect and I value their wisdom disagree with me on this issue because, in my opinion, I'm like, what is the danger of discrediting scholars, especially in mass? And what is this danger of exposing people, especially that are Muslim? Because in my head, the honor for Muslim is higher than the honor of the Kaaba, for example.
Right.
Especially if they can be the wali of Allah. What if this person's actually a friend of God? Am I supposed to, many of my friends tell me that this is the nahy anil munkar, right? And
Amr bil ma'ruf.
And Amr bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar. This is standing for what is right, and deterring what is bad.
Yes.
And they have good arguments. They say things like, I don't want to send my child to that star. We as the community, we as the public need to know about what they're doing in their private matters, especially if they get exposed, because I don't want to send my kids there.
Right.
I think the youth should be learning from them. They also cite the hadith where the Prophet, peace be upon him, says, I fear for you something worse than the Dajjal. And they asked him, what Prophet, Muhammad, peace be upon him? And he said, corrupt scholars. So they do have a valid argument. But in my mind, I go, I can't cancel a Muslim. I can't determine that someone is doomed.
Yeah. No, definitely. It's an epistemic problem. It's not a theoretical problem. Because theoretically, yeah. I mean, if you go through Rijab, right? If you go through the hadith scholars, they're very frank, right? And they're frank because it's just business. It's not personal, right? They're not monetized. Their hadith folks weren't monetized. They would go and say, this person, very righteous person, weak memory. This person, their memory was strong, then they hit 60, they started going senile, right? This person, they fudge things. Like, they're not honest, right? And so is this slander? No, it's not. Because it serves the greater maqsad of preserving the deen, right? Now, the question is that you and me? No, these are specialists, right? So, and people who, may Allah bless them, increase them, that are motivated by sincere intentions and want to do al-amr bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar, it has conditions, right? You don't want to be Don Quixote out there and you're fighting windmills and you think you're fighting dragons, right? Like, it has prerequisites and conditions, and you need to have a certain amount of training to understand what is the ma'ruf that you're commanding and what is the nahi, what is the munkar that you're forbidding, and how these things combine. Right. And that's why you need a scholarly class that is able to have this sort of cohesion and intervene. And yeah, like, I don't have to figure it out. But if there was a body that was able to be like, yeah, it's like this person needs to take some time away. Okay, this person, maybe they're ready to come back in a small thing or whatever, in a small, like a trial run, right? A pilot run in a small community or something like that, and see how it goes. Like, that makes sense to me, because then you have people because some of these things bleed over into talaq, right? So, if you're talking about things that are, we know that recently there was a scandal between a husband and their wife or exes or whatever. Who has the ability to investigate and really get to the bottom and see what's right? Do you? Do I? We don't. Okay, right?
But for example,
yes.
I'm glad you brought that up. People will I said, for example, I would never look into that. I didn't even hear about it. They're like, you should at least know. Because again, they're like, I don't want to send my kids to that person. So
You can not send your kids to that person or that scholar without having to know all the nitty-gritty details. Like, it's not your place to know, to be frank, right? It's like you need someone who has authority enough and enough knowledge of Islam to go through the details and have the investigation to be able to get to the bottom of it. Because for you and me, it's just he said, she said. You know,
what about these?
However, we do have a structural challenge in America, and that is that we don't have law. We don't have judges that have political authority to go do that work, which is something I can sympathize with, because some of the religious leadership didn't want to get involved. And I can see the perspective, because if you don't have the ability to be like, here's a subpoena, here's a warrant, I need this document and that document from you, or I need this and that from you. It's like, you know, sometimes people play games with you, and sometimes people, they only show you like what they want to show you, and they try to create a narrative. So I'm even sympathetic to that. But what I do know is that, yeah, it's not you and me. It's like, it's not our place to necessarily try to dig into the bottom. Yeah, you can pull your kids out, and that's one up, right? That's your day out. That's you being careful. I would be careful. If there was a scandal involving somebody, I would probably not send my kids to them. And that's a decision that I would make for my children out of my caution and my, you know, religious devotionary caution. But that doesn't mean that I have to go digging into the fine details and come to some opinion. And you know, I've watched all the videos, and I think, yeah, I really think that, you know, he's wrong or she's wrong. Like, that's high school. That's high school. You know, it's like, we're really just living a soap opera, like, at that point. So it's a false dilemma, right? We can do one and have one caution, and even have general reminders about, like, you know, brothers, this is what we should be in our marriages, and this is what we should look for in a wife, and you should be careful about these qualities, or et cetera, et cetera. And women, you know, you should be careful about, you know, we should look for this in a spouse, and generalities. Yeah, sure, no problem. But this whole fake private investigator nonsense that people do, and they think that they're doing something for the deen, just tell us that you like a juicy gossip story. Just don't pretend that you're doing deen, because that's not deen. You're not being the qadi. You're not actually doing anything.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the YouTubers that are making a living off of it, actually making hundreds of thousands or millions of views off of exposing scholars or exposing religious figures? And the funny thing about that is that they don't give an alternative to who someone should actually listen to, leaving their audience to only find them to be the only ones to listen to and can trust.
Yeah, that's a really important thing. I think about it from a couple different angles. You know, I think that the lack of oversight and vetting and processes and, you know, regulation of platforming and stuff like that has created a vacuum in which people can kind of thrive and do certain things. So without fixing that structural element, like, the people who are doing that, they will say, well, no one else is saying anything, right? That's kind of like what you hear. And there's something of a point to that, right? It's like, we do have to do a better job of vetting speakers. We do have to have higher standards. We do have to figure out some sort of way of, you know, credentialing or standardizing credentials or something like that, like all the stuff that we've talked about. So, I mean, that's fair. I think I'll grant that to a point. I think that the biggest problem of the sort of the situation that you laid out, even more than like not providing alternatives, because sometimes you don't know, and so you shouldn't have someone just like, you know, offer a fake alternative. They don't really know what else you should be doing. I think that the monetary compensation is a way bigger issue that nobody's talking about. I think that there's a huge elephant in the room when it comes to the Dawasphere, that you'll look at channels, and look at their most popular videos, okay? And you will find often that the most popular video with the most hits is the one that's dragging somebody, is the one that's calling out somebody, exposing somebody, quote unquote. You know, and this is across the board. So if somebody wants to teach Arabic, or somebody wants to talk about Tawheed, or somebody wants to talk about the Sirah, or somebody wants to talk about fiqh, or somebody wants to talk about, you know, qasas or biographies or things like that, go through their whole library. What's got the most hits and brought in the most money? It's the refutation, it's the expose. Tell me that's not a problem. That's a big problem. That's a huge problem for that person's sincerity, whether they realize it or not. The algorithm is not your friend. The algorithm is doing the work of the shaitan in this scenario, is that you are going to be afflicted with this trial of being tempted to continue down this process of who's the next person I can refute? Who's the next person I can expose, right? Because it's going to bring you the hits. It's going to bring you the likes. Everyone's going to jump in the comment section, cheer you on, tell you you're the lion of Islam and you're defending Islam, right? You're going to feel, like a horse. You're going to, as they say in Morocco, you're going to feel like you're something big because you're doing this service. And you don't even realize the shaitan's got you like in between. It's like a chokehold, right? That's a huge problem, right? So another problem adjacent to that is our branding, right? Like when people are their own brand, that creates an enormous disincentive to ever admit that you're wrong, right? If, we, unfortunately, the logic of social media is very individualistic, right? And if we want to hold each other into account in a better way, I think we need to operate in collectives a little bit more. I think that we need to be very careful about associating ourselves with a brand. If there's only one person who's the face of an organization or two people who's the face of an organization, now you've got all these likes. Now you've got a certain income stream coming in monthly from the YouTube ads or from fundraisers or from whatever. Okay, you made a blunder, right? It's going to be really hard for you to admit it. It's going to be really, really hard. It's going to be way easier and more tempting to just double down on it. So I think that's the biggest threat, right, from the situation that you laid out. I think that there's a couple things that we can do to balance it out. I think people, again, I think everybody should be able to name their mentors, right? I think that suhbah is crucial. And I think people should be open about that without name dropping, right? It's like, oh, I sat with this sheikh. The sheikh has no idea who you are. Like, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actual people. Everybody should have an ecosystem of checks and balances, right? People that are advising them. And even social media channels should be set up so that they're more collective and less individualistic. We should be more collaborative and less competitive, because that's another thing too, right? Like the algorithm people are in a scarcity mindset. You see people hating on somebody. Everybody wants to take somebody down. People who were friends yesterday, now they're beefing today. It's good for the clicks. It's good for the likes. It's good for the dollars. Okay. How many people are actually reaching out across the aisle and say, hey, let's do something together. Even if I disagree with you about 7 out of 10 things, we got 3 things that we agree about. Let's collaborate on something. How many people are doing that? Very rare. Okay. Now you tell me that that's good for the state of our hearts. And we claim to be doing Allah's work. Listen to us. We claim to be doing Allah's work. How do we know that every single video we make, every single click, every single dollar isn't going to be against us, around our necks, dragging us into the hellfire? Serious. Look in the camera. Serious. How do you know? Every single person has to take this extremely serious. It's not a game. It's not a joke. This is your afterlife, right? So quit screwing around. Everybody has to take the precautions, right? And if we do that and we collaborate and we're sincere, that doesn't mean that we're all just going to tell everybody what they want to hear. It doesn't mean we're going to be soft on kufr and bid'ah and stuff like that. That has its place. But even the refutation of valid refutation, if it's for your ego, what is it going to do for you in the afterlife? It's only going to hurt you.
What do you think? Should we expose the exposers? Should we do what they're doing and cancel them and excommunicate them?
No, I don't think that's productive either. Because if you look at how the Prophet ﷺ dealt with the hypocrites, even though they were living among his midst, he was willing to go to war, but he wouldn't kill his even the hypocrites that lived among them. And but not saying that these people are hypocrites. These are things that happen to people. They're spiritual dangers. It's a minefield, right? It's a slaughterhouse, as one of the quotes goes, right? Fame is like slaughterhouse. So there's sympathy is deserved for those people, and sort of it doesn't really hit home until you know a famous person.
What do you mean by fame is a slaughterhouse?
Fame is a slaughterhouse means that it's I think a better idiom in English would be like a minefield, right? It's like walking through a minefield. Like you getting to Jannah and you're famous, you're like a celebrity, is like walking through a minefield. It's like you're more likely to lose a leg than you are to get to the other side unscathed. Extremely dangerous. All the books of Tazkiyah talk about Ujub and Kibr and all these sorts of things that afflict the soul, and fame just put lighter fluid on it.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm sorry, I lost track of your previous question.
Yeah.
Should we refute the refuters? No, I don't think so. I think that we need to drown it out with say it. I think that's the main thing. There will be individual cases and instances where if someone is explicitly lying, that needs to be called out. But I think that the main tactic is to drown it out with good. pray for your enemy, pray for their guidance, reach across the aisle, try to collaborate, try to reach out, try to find something good. And even, like, it's funny, if you think about, the Dawa scene on the English speaking sort of internet, there's not that many people. Like, you can fit them all in a room, right? That's, what about all the masajid that are doing real good stuff on the ground? They just don't have a camera crew. They just don't have social media channels, right? Like, I think that we could be training people, training youth, showing them what equipment to use and like how to run a social media channel, almost like a consulting thing, and get them off the ground. What if we had 20 more masajid in a calendar year putting out like quality content, Arabic, fiqh, hadith, just tafsir, like stuff that everybody needs, right? If we have 20 more every year, which isn't a lot, right? Think about how that would change the ecosystem of what's out there to digest. It wouldn't be as much like, oh, this speaker versus this speaker. They were friends yesterday. They used to work at the same institute. Now they're beefing and suing each other, right? It would be like, okay, well, there's this masjid over in California, this one in New York, and this one in Texas. And, they all have their stuff. And honestly, it'd be a lot healthier for the consumer, and it'd be a lot healthier for the people in front of the camera as well.
Yeah. So most of the things that we've spoken about today have happened to Yaqeen in some way, shape, or form.
Yep.
People have made a pretty penny off of capitalizing on some quote-unquote Yaqeen controversies. Would you like to address those issues and what people have said about Yaqeen?
Well, I mean, you asked generally, so I'll be able to respond generally, which is that I've always been someone who believed in verification. I think Allah commands us to verify scenarios and, again, keep the path to redemption open. And one of the sheikhs that I was closest to in my time in Medina, Sheikh Shanqiti, he would teach us that if it's possible to take your brother by the hand and show them a better way and help improve things, then that becomes your duty. It's possible to do that. So you want to keep going? Or you
Correct.
Yeah. So I knew what people were saying about Yaqeen before I joined it. I only started March 1st. So I went. They invited me to come to their organization retreat last fall, about a year ago, and I asked hard questions to people face to face. I didn't have a camera, didn't bring a camera, didn't put it on, didn't make my up pretty penny, monetizing sort of, expose videos or anything. I asked people hard questions in private, and I found that people wanted to improve and were willing to listen to feedback, and admitted that there had been certain mistakes in the past, and were very open to trying to rectify those mistakes and needed help in actually rectifying those mistakes, and we're looking for people to help. Because some people that they told me, well, it's like, well, you could have just advised them and not joined. And then actually, my response does actually no. Like, someone had to roll up their sleeves and do the work, right? And I'm not trying to put myself up on a pedestal. It's a bunch of people who have joined, and a bunch of people who have been there already. I'm not trying to also throw people under the bus that have been there since the beginning. There's a ton of good work that's going on, But when it came to getting it all on the right track and having it all work in a better direction, they needed people. They needed more people. And so at a certain point, they approached me and they'd be like, would you help us with this, basically? And I told them, listen, I speak my mind. I'm not, and anybody who follows our stuff on Utica Messi channel or my stuff on Blogging Theology with Paul Williams, I don't mince my words for anybody. It's not possible. I'm from New Jersey. A convert. I've lost jobs, relationships, opportunities just for being a Muslim. So I'm not going to sell out. I'm not a sellout. Alhamdulillah. So I said, yeah, if I'm able to actually have the impact I want and do what I want and say what I want, not that I'm going to be like, not that I'm going to be belligerent, but, be able to make the improvements that I think need to be made and be supported in that, then Bismillah, let's do it. And today actually marks 7 months that I've been with Yaqeen, and I've seen a dramatic change.
What do you mean by a dramatic change? What did they change? What did they want to prove? What did they see was an issue in their own institute?
Well, there's several things, but I think there's one thing as far as process goes that sort of had a big trickle-down effect. And this is not like secret information. It's just that in the beginning, the organization understood itself in a certain light, and then that understanding changed as time went on. And I talked about this on our Love podcast as well, that in the beginning, they imagined that they would provide a platform for Muslims to publish and air multiple opinions, right? Even if those were conflicting or even contradicting. So they didn't necessarily have this Dawah identity that they were going to be firmly stating, hey, this is true, this is what you have to take home with, and you go with that. They were more thinking about it or conceptualizing it as providing like an open space or a platform where people can exchange ideas and maybe debate and things like that. And you saw that with some of the articles that had multiple contradictory opinions. Like there were articles about Aisha's age, and so there was one article with this opinion and then a separate article with another opinion. There were certain, I think the evolution paper, obviously the LGBTQ paper that was notorious. Though it was one paper, it was two opinions within one paper, right? So that was part of an organizational identity that at a certain point, they took a look in the mirror, a hard look in the mirror, and they said, this isn't working. Is that we're actually not contributing to people's certainty with this identity, this model. That if we're going to have the impact that we want to have on the Ummah, we need to have a much stronger Dawah dimension. We need to leave people with much more, with much less equivocation. If we're erring on the side of telling people what they want to hear, we need to shift it more to telling people what they need to hear, right? And so these are all very, very open conversations that we've been having. We just finished the organizational retreat for this year. We've had nonstop having these conversations for 4 days in a row. But we've made a lot of changes in order to affect that. One of the things is that all the media has a lot more supervision now from the research team. Before it was very, very siloed, right? So you'd have people, putting out things on social media that weren't necessarily getting eyes on them from people with Islamic training. That's a huge problem, right? Yeah. And then also when it came to the way that papers were sort of approved, there were some checks. So it's like, but the checks weren't robust enough. Things were falling through the cracks. Sometimes trust was extended to certain people who had a certain name or status within secular academics without necessarily going through to ask, does this have a strong enough, what I would say in philosophical language, normative dimension? Like, is this going to really is someone going to walk away from this paper with confidence of what to believe, right? Like that was something that wasn't there in some of the papers before. And so
if healthy though, to have differing opinions even within one institute, to be able to have an opinion on evolution that among scholars differs and on other subjects.
It can be, but it's a case-by-case basis, right? So it's not everything is a fiqh issue, right? Because, or let's say this, that differences have different implications depending on what the difference is about. We can disagree about fiqh all day, and as long as those things trace back to the madhab, then we're good. We're not going to ever resolve those issues. When it comes to specific dawah issues that are like shubuhats, that are like things that are really affecting and undermining people's faith, then instead of trying to tell people like the most immediately reassuring thing, that's like a very, very short-term strategy that might have long-term negative consequences of eroding the faith that we're supposedly defending in the first place, right? So that's kind of more along the lines of what I'm talking about, where there needs to be a longer view on the room that's saying it's like, yeah, people might hate your guts for the short term. That doesn't matter. Like we lose subscribers. Who cares about losing subscribers? People push the down button, the thumbs down and leave nasty comments. Like who cares? If we have a process that's rooted in like orthodox deen, right? Like what the deen is about. And it goes a ton of people that have expertise look at it. And we say, we approve of this. We stand behind this 100%. That right? We don't fear the blame of the blamer. Like that's where we're at now. And that was what was missing before. Now, this is an organization of a lot of people, right? So what a lot of people didn't understand is that it takes a significant amount of time and actually restructuring to put the processes in place that are going to have those effects take notice. So I told people, some people challenged me and said, yeah, you're going to get swallowed up. You're going to become liberal. You're going to like people. I've heard it all. And I told people, give me 6 months, and I'll stand on that. I want I'll challenge someone to show me something that we've put out since March 1st, 2023, that was problematic that we didn't fix like very immediately. Like there was like, I think one like thumbnail, like we messed up, like I'm not even sure like the process, but they put it out and it wasn't a good look. And then like we said, hey, wait a second, like that doesn't make sense. We can't do that. And we pulled it back and we changed it. But show me an article, show me a video in the video series, especially I have a new show that they let me do, complete green light, nobody breathing down my neck, telling me what to say, dogma disrupted. You know, we're at 15, 16 episodes. You know, it's a lot of great conversations, a lot of hard conversations. Yeah, my perennialism paper came out like this past month, like very unapologetic, very much taking a shot at what I see as an existential threat to Islam being Islam, right? And being specifically and exclusively salvific as a tradition, right? No problems with that. So I would challenge people. It's like, okay, yeah, you could point to me something that happened in 2017 and 2018, 2019. Show me something from March 1st, 2023 that you disagree with and get in touch. If it's legitimate, hey, like anybody can make mistakes. But I think anybody who's been actually paying attention can say that this is a different Yaqeen and that this is putting out way different stuff and it's higher caliber and it's better and it's stronger. And inshallah, Allah accepts it.
There are many people that see Yaqeen and believe that you can either call it conspiracy theory, but there are many people that have a belief notion that Yaqeen is a liberal machine that is intentionally intending on manipulating the mass minds of Muslims to be more accommodating of the liberal state of the world. Is this true? Once entering actually Yaqeen and seeing the infrastructure and bureaucracy within it, is this something that they're actually trying to accomplish?
That's just a lie. And anybody who goes down that path has no idea what they're talking about, especially from the financial aspect. And I will say that it's like the organization is extremely careful that it is not compromised with any conflicts of interests when it comes to where its financing comes from. And they have not, as far as I remember, this is a statement. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that, but I think that they have, to my knowledge, never accepted any money from the government or anything like that. Like they are very, very, very strict when it comes to, like, they changed their zakat policy. Like, 'cause they are called out before I joined. They are called out on the zakat policy of being too loose. And they looked in the mirror and they said, yeah, that's right. That's fair criticism. Like, we can't be accepting zakat money for everything we're doing. It's not, you know, let's not be so loose with that. Let's respect zakat a little bit more than that. So that changed. No longer accepting zakat money. Right. I'm very proud. No, they don't at all. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know where the liberal thing comes from. I think people, people, unfortunately, I think they think very sloppily. And so people fail to, I'll give you an example. A lot of people that hate on Yaqeen think that Yasser Qadhi like works for Yaqeen. Right. And that's, I'm not taking shots at anybody. I'm just saying, like, that's factually not true. Right. It's like they conflate things very easily, right? Because they don't understand the structure of things and how things work. What they do is they have this sort of preconceived notion of liberal Islam, American Islam, whatever they want to call it. They've identified, the evil demons of that sort of movement as they see it, and then it's all just sort of one big mishmash. Well, that's just not true, first of all. And second of all, again, I challenge, like look at the actual article that we have on LGBTQ right now and tell me that is, we're some sort of in the pocket of some liberal machine. Look at the actual articles that we have now, that my article on perennialism. Look at the videos that we did all of June, all of Pride Month that we did on LGBTQ issues, and tell me that we're part of some liberal political machine. Like, I dare you. And, if somebody wants to say it in the comment section, then, come say it to my face. It's like these things are just ridiculous. Again, people don't realize that things can change. Again, many of these criticisms, they come back to from 2017, 2018, even 2019. But I've got the receipts, It's like, show me something recent. Show me something.
Was it true before, though?
Before what?
2017, 18, 19.
In the so dramatically stated? No. In the like a liberal machine out to indoctrinate? No, absolutely not. I think that there were also the most I'll grant is that there were some people and are some people in the organization that at that time and in that political climate thought that as far as political alliances went, that it was more advantageous to Muslim interests to ally with the left than the right. Yeah, that's true. But a lot of those opinions have changed too, right? As we've seen in the last 2 years, like the crazy stuff that's going on in schools, gender ideology, the lack of parents' rights and education, all the things that are just absolutely unchanged, changed a lot of people's minds, right? Like when people were thinking in in Trump's America, they were thinking with very different lenses than they were thinking, today. And you can look back and say, well, that was really wrong. And yeah, we can agree that was really wrong. But that's a different thing from saying they were wrong to they're motivated by money, or they're just out to like they're appealing into their motivations and saying that this is some sort of fifth column that's just out to indoctrinate people. That's very, very far-fetched.
You mentioned before we started that you had a story that posted.
Yeah, it made me laugh because it's a funny story. When we were in Medina, there was when you're in certain spaces outside the West, talking about conspiracy theories, right? Certain conspiracy theories circulate very easily. So I was driving at the point where I finally was able to afford a car. I had a car, and I was driving back from the university to our dorm, and I had some other students from different places in the world, Africa, Asia, etc., riding along with me, and they were debating whether the Americans ever went to the moon or not. And they were all saying that there's no way the Americans went to the moon. Like, it's not possible. And it's like, and they said, no, I saw these videos on YouTube of the lighting and this and that. Well, they had their evidences, right? And so what I did was I hit it with a counter conspiracy. I said, oh, wait a second. Neil Armstrong heard the adhan in space and became a Muslim. Mm-hmm. Which isn't true. Yeah. But is another conspiracy that was circling at the time, right? It's like, so if he didn't go to the moon, how did he hear the adhan and accept Islam? And they're like, wow, you're right. That makes so much sense. So I just saw it and laughed because it reminded me of that. But that's honestly a bit of munasabah. Like, that's actually a really useful and appropriate story for everything we're talking about. You can't be gullible as a Muslim. You can't be gullible. The Prophet ﷺ said that the believer is not stoned through the same hole twice. Right? It basically means, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Right? We have that as part of our deed. And we have to be smarter than to conflate issues that are separate, and to think that people can't change, and to get riled up by certain narratives and certain conspiracies. We have to be smarter than that. We have to be careful. We have to verify. We have to look at things objectively, because it's very, very easy to get taken down a path of, a tribalistic sort of way of thinking. It's like, even with your good intentions, the sheikh doesn't care, right? If you have good intentions, you have this sort of hirs, this sort of, zeal for the deen, you want to defend the deen, the sheikh can use that against you, right? He can get you thinking that you're doing the work of da'wah and defending Islam, when really you're just slandering people and assuming the worst of them, and, falling into sin, right? So we all have to be better.
I'm falling right into your words earlier, but I'm going to do it anyways with a sip out, which is, do you have any conspiracies that you actually think are true? Do you think?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. This is the first time that anyone's ever going to see this on online. I told this actually to one of the classes that I teach the other day, because we were talking about something similar. There is probably, because this is important, because once you study a certain amount, every scholar has a wacky opinion. It's just facts. Like, take anybody, Taymiyyah, Ghazali, like any scholar. If you really dig through the weeds, you're going to find that they have a wacky opinion, right? So my students had asked me, like, what's your wacky opinion? My wacky opinion, I'm not 100% convinced that dinosaurs ever existed.
What?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's true. It's true, because, and there's certain, I have a certain sensitivity to children's books. I have 3 children, and I pay very, very close attention, and I give a lot of scrutiny to the sort of children's literature. And there's a very, very heavy emphasis on dinosaurs when it comes to kids' books and toys and movies and things like this. And so I started asking myself, what do dinosaurs represent in our society that they would receive so much attention, right? Why not troglodytes, or these different other organisms or things that used to exist, mammoths, right? Or saber-toothed tigers, or anything, right? And dinosaurs are really essential to sort of the materialistic and evolutionary sense of history, right? The idea that, birds evolved from dinosaurs, and we all sort of evolved from this, that, and the other, which, I completely reject. I think is the most foolish, faux scientific narrative. that's out there right now. It's kind of like the big lie that so many people believe. I think, by the way, like while we're on it, I think that some scholars and apologists cede way too much credit to evolutionary theory. I think like by trying to look for this epidemic exceptionalism and things like that, I think it ain't that deep sometimes. Like, evolution has so many holes as a narrative for the origin of species. Well, by the way, species is a human construct, right? And then also for explaining human existence, right? We don't need to cede that much ground at this point. If at some point the scientific sort of evidence keeps stacking up, that it's like becomes like, okay, then maybe we can cede more ground, but we're not there yet. You know what I mean? So dinosaurs symbolize a really important part discursively for evolutionists, right? And so it's something that's deployed and put in the minds of our children very early, perhaps in order to soften them up to evolutionary theory and like the centrality and the obviousness of it, like the self-evidence of it, and say, oh, it's just self-evident. Right. Now, I am not a scientist, and so I recognize the limitations of my own methodology and ability to know things in this field. But some people have shown me things that the actual material evidence from which they reconstruct the idea of what dinosaurs looked like is very minimal, like compared to like the boldness of the claims that are being made from the amount of evidence that actually exists. Like there are bones. There are, other things, and there is some interpretive latitude sometimes perhaps being taken in how those things are arranged and what types of creatures were they and how did they look and how they act, et cetera, et cetera. I could be wrong, but I'm not saying they didn't exist. I'm just saying that I'm not 100% convinced they existed.
So what's your problem with evolutionary theory?
Evolutionary theory is, it's against Islam, and it's against science as well. If we're not talking about microevolution, okay, which is that species can change over time, okay, yeah, duh, right? But we're talking about macroevolution, so the idea that bacteria became fish, became dinosaurs, became birds, became humans, right? That's called speciation, right? First of all, there's no science to back that up. Like, to be honest, you have lots of things that science has not been able to explain. You have the explosion of speciation at the Cambrian era and different things. And it's getting late, so forgive me if I'm probably going to screw up my words and misquote things at this point. But you got several holes in the narrative. You got several holes in the evolutionary narrative that have not been filled. So the idea of macroevolution is more narrative than science. And historically, it was a deliberately constructed narrative to displace the church and the authority of Christianity. Is very, very politicized from the beginning, right? And that's no secret for anyone who knows the history of the deployment of evolutionary theory. So it was the case of wishful thinking scientists who wanted it to be true and constructed, a certain narrative out of whatever evidence they could scrounge up in order to come to this conclusion. I mentioned just a second ago about the idea of species being a human construct. This is actually really important to the evolutionary debate. That isn't a point that I've seen a lot of people bring up, but that might just be my own ignorance. So, for example, my oldest son is really into bird watching. He's like obsessed with birds, and so I have learned a lot through him. And actually, I do it with him. Like it's just something we bond over. We get like this, like Cornell University has like its ornithology lab, and they have a magazine, The Living Bird, that comes out every month, something, whatever. We get it, and I have a subscription to it, and we read through the articles. It's nauseating to read through the articles because they're so biased in favor of evolution. And there's so many bold claims, without a whole lot of evidence. But one of the things that I noticed is that if you look at even just birds, okay, nobody has any agreement as to what a species actually is. Like what makes something a species? There is no consensus. There's nothing anywhere close to a consensus as to what makes something a separate species from something else. So, for example, in the birding world, there was a period at which they decided that the main criteria for what distinguished two species was whether they could produce offspring together, right? So according to that definition, they had a dramatic, they had to make up a bunch of new species names for these, like whatever, okay? 70 years later, the criteria shifted. So actually, it's not so simple. It's not so simple as just what can't, have offspring, because we do find that under that criteria, different species were still having offspring, right? So there's like Lawrence's warblers and like, my son would know all this. I space on the names. Brewster's warblers, and if they breed, like they produce like a different type of warbler, like it happens, right? And it doesn't happen with everything, but it happens, like definitely. And things that are just separated by geography, but if in the over sort of the little piece of geography where they overlap, will interbreed, right? I'm not sure if meadowlarks, I can't remember. It's been a while since I read the article. I think chickadees, there's different species of chickadees, black cap chickadees, et cetera, that at the borderlands of their ranges will interbreed, right? Well, where's your definition of species there? They just don't. It doesn't mean they can't, right? So then they retooled the idea of what a species was, and then they found out that, okay, well, we've said that there's like maybe, for example, this is just dumb numbers, 70 species. There's actually like, 55 species, right? So this is something that is a completely human construct, this idea of one species being completely separate from another species, right? We don't know, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that he created things like in different types of things, right? What is Allah's categorization of those things, right? Are birds like a thing, right? Are there, smaller like categories within that group, right? Etc. We're coming at it with our own sort of man-made lens of like, we created this thing called a genus. We've come up with this thing called a species. And now it creates a problem. Well, why does this species exist? Well, ask yourself first what a species is and why you decided that these two things are separate anyway. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like, this is kind of like a very, very long tangent, but I think the meta point is important, is that when it comes to science, it's like we need to question our own categories first. And, the idea, to get back to your main question about what's wrong with evolution, the idea that a human being evolves from from a monkey, from something else, that every life evolved from something that contradicts how Allah told us that he created man, right? And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that this is the way that he created Adam, and especially through the Sunnah, with more detail about this is the way that Adam was created, then that's what it is. Like, we're actually being scientific here and not them. And what I mean by that is that the methodology that we employ, we decide what's evidence first, and then we follow the evidence no matter where it leads. Okay? We don't agree to something dogmatically first, and then go back and cook the books and to fit the narrative that we want. Right? We have a process of determining what is Quran and what's not. We have a process of determining what's Sunnah and what's not. And then we have to pick up the pieces and deal with the mess. If two things seem to contradict each other, so what I mean by the mess is that we have to reconcile them. We don't just reject anything and say, because this is inconvenient and it bucks the narrative. We don't do that. Like, we say, no, we know for a fact that this is revelation. So now we are the ones that have to interpret it to make sure that it all jives in a coherent way according to the interpretations of the Prophet ﷺ, etc.
Don't you think, though, that we're almost adopting a evangelical narrative when it comes to evolution? Because outside of the creation of Adam, peace be upon him, how does evolution contradict itself in any way?
The fact that an evangelical says something doesn't mean it's wrong. And this is something that people need to know. That I'm glad we were having this discussion just earlier today on a WhatsApp group, and people need to get this reactionary thinking out of their head, because right now you have people who, for whatever reason, either ideologically or politically, are invested in their connections on the left. Now that the Muslim community is starting to shift a little bit to the right, they're bringing up these sorts of arguments and saying like, well, you're just deriving your arguments from the right. So what? Is it, you didn't tell me that it's not true, right? I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to these people, right? So it's like, so we need to have better criteria. We say that the truth is not known by men, rather men are known by the truth. But where does that go, right? It's like, even the shaitan, right, can be right? Sadaqa wa kadhub, right? In the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Yes, he was right in what he told Abu Hurairah, radiallahu anhu, even though he's a known lie, right? And even Bilqis in the Quran, right? When she said she was a sun worshiper, she's a mushrika, and she said, let's not go to war, to her advisors, because when that happens, the best and brightest, of every society, is laid low and debased and humiliated. And Allah said, look at that. I was like, yeah, that's right. He confirmed it, despite who she was, right? So who a person was, and Malcolm X also said, he said, I'm for the truth no matter who says it. right? Like that's how we have to be as Muslims. Like, don't talk to me to the left and right stuff. So and so said it. Trump said it. Daniel said it. If he said it, it's true. It's true.
Yeah, but I mean more like that's why
You took me down. You took me down. But the point is, like, we need to be mature. If someone says something that's true, it doesn't matter who it was that said it. Is it true or not? Right. So it might be problematic, but saying that this is what evangelicals are saying does not prove to me that's problematic.
I think
the second thing.
I think the thing about evangelicals is that they have a natural interest in disagreeing with evolutionary theory because it actually goes against their religion. Because they believe the Earth is like 6,000 years old,
right.
And so on. So
right.
It's not bound by those interests. We don't have that restriction of timeline and so on.
That's true, but that still doesn't mean that they're wrong. We have to deal with the issue itself and not who's saying it here or why are they saying it or whatever. Like they could be right for the wrong reasons, right?
Yeah,
it happens. So again, like this is usul. Like we have to be usulis in these sorts of things. We have to be very rigorous and consistent in our logic and our reasoning and not fall prey to these sorts of fallacies. We good?
Yeah. I'm just checking with that.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like if someone on the right says it, if Trump says it, if whoever says it, okay. If it's true, it doesn't become false just because he said it, right? So when it comes to texts, it's too late. I'm too tired to rifle through it and bring texts. But Allah is fairly clear that He, created everything in existence in the Quran, and the dhahir of His speech is that He created it directly, not through some sort of evolutionary process per se. Now, yeah, there's some wiggle room there that I'm too tired to have that conversation, but that's a discussion that's a discussion that should be had. Those like fine details. Yeah, I advocate for people having those discussions, but I think that at face value, you have to take. I'm always someone who's very sensitive to the political pressures of the moment, right? So, you have to realize that Muslims are being put. This conversation happens in a larger context of mainstream liberal academic educated society pointing the finger at Muslims and saying, it's so ridiculous what you guys believe. You believe this, you guys are just like them. The reaction is not to say, no, we're not like them. We're just like you guys, right? We have to be careful about doing that. We have to have a sober and principled investigation of our own revelation, our own tradition, our own sources, and then say what our tradition says, even if they don't like it.
I'll ask you my closing question.
All right.
If you were to enter Jannah today, actually, I want to see this. What point in history, if you were to pick one, other than the Prophet, peace be upon him, would you choose to go back to?
Man. I'm going to reject the question because of the statement of Al-Miqdad. Al-Miqdad, one day after the Prophet passed away, he was sitting with some tabi'een. And the tabi'een were like, they were young guys. They were like, juiced up. They were like, their adrenaline flowing. They're like, man, we wish that we could have lived at the time of the Prophet. We would have been in this battle, we would have done this and then this. Dad just kind of listened to him. Right? It was like, none of you should want to be back at those times because those times were a fitna. And you don't know which side you would have been on. Allah put you in this place and in this time for a reason. So, with all due respect, I'm going to deflect. And I'm going to say, Allah put me in this time for a reason. I'm happy from someone who was born in a non-Muslim family. The most important thing to me is that I'm a Muslim. And I accept this then. And that's a gift that I would not want to be ungrateful for. And so I would fear that if I was put in another time and place, maybe that doesn't happen. So,
okay, let me rearrange the question.
Okay, sure.
Out of curiosity, just viewing that time period, seeing its secrets, not living in it.
Okay, so let's imagine I had a time machine and I could go and like be with like some person. It would be Umar ibn Khattab. I would want to see his statecraft. Volumes and volumes and volumes have to be written about what Umar radiallahu anhu did for Muslim, the Dawla, right, the Khilafah. Absolutely amazing things like innovative processes and in the good sense of innovation, right? Because it's about administration, it was about justice, it was about that gray area of fiqh that exists in maslaha mursala, right? Or maslaha mu'tabara, right? There's certain things that the Sharia actively, explicitly approves of, but doesn't define exhaustively every single thing that you can do to pursue that good. Or there's maslaha mursala, there's things that the Sharia neither rejects or confirms as a maslaha, but that is, you've got some leeway in. The things that he did as the Khalifa are very much in that realm, and they're super, super interesting. There's so many lessons that we can derive from them. So I would just want to just be taking notes and really, really soaking in like what he did and how he, and also for lessons of leadership and accountability. Obviously, there's nobody, well, I shouldn't say there's nobody, that's not correct, but Umar ibn Khattab was a sterling example, a shining example of accountability as a leader. As somebody who was actively seeking other people criticize him so he could get better, was actively invested out of love, tough love for his governors and his commanders and whatever, because he understood the gravity of the thing. It wasn't for clout. It wasn't for clicks. It wasn't for likes. It wasn't for ad revenue or fundraisers. He wanted Islam to succeed. And so you had to be on point, but it was for the right reason. And he had that loyalty and that level of calling you out. Like, so again, we're full circle there, because we're missing the loyalty, right? We can call each other out. It's not a problem, but we have to have that loyalty like he had.
And going into the future, inshallah, if Allah grants you Jannah, what's one thing you want to do outside of meeting the Prophet, peace be upon him, as soon as you enter Jannah?
That's a very, very hard question. I
think this is the first time I've ever heard you say that's a hard question.
Yeah, no, that's a hard question. Politics, I can talk about politics, theory, strategy. This is what, I talk about all day. But I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't know. I don't have an answer.
Really?
No, I don't have an answer.
Well, why is it that you do what you do? What made you decide to become an imam? What motivates you to do this?
Just advancing Islam. I just believe in the Dawah. I believe in advancing Islam. I want Islam to be in every home. I want people who malign Islam to shut their mouths. I want to shut their mouths for them with the pen and with the video and with whatever tools that we have. I want to bring the Muslims together. The UK Muslims, the US Muslims, enough of this rivalry, this stupid taking pride in like, oh, we're harder than you or we're soft. No, let's squash this beef and let's do some real dawah. Let's do real work, right? And it's like, like maybe it takes a convert, I don't know. But it's like, my parents are not Muslims. Like, my sister's not a Muslim, right? Like, I want Islam to succeed so bad. I want the Muslims to succeed so bad. I want the dawah to succeed so bad. And so it's just about, let's just grow up. And let's just, yes, make the corrections that we have to do, but let's be about us. Let's be together and loyal to each other. And at the end, if I can at least dedicate my life to trying my best, then I can go in peace. And I can look behind and say I did what I could. And, I think that's why maybe I'm drawing a blank on your question, because I don't even look that far ahead. I'm just about like, I know with confidence that this is right now to spend my energy in this way. And there's so much work to do. There's so many things that we can do. I mean, I do take a personal sort of, I take it as an aspirational model. I'm not be falling asleep during the day, because he's always thinking about how can we improve this? How can we change this? How can we do this? Right? I feel a huge burden of responsibility. That's usually what kind of occupies my thoughts. But I'll rest in the grave, inshallah. Like in that, and then I'll deal with that when I get there. Right now is the Liberalize. This is the opportunity to work and to act. Yeah. So sorry.
Allah bless you with everything that you dream to do, and more, inshallah.
I mean, you too.
Imam Tom, Scholar Tom.
Just Tom.
Sheikh Tom. Yeah. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Allah bless you.
You know what a daff? Is that something you guys do?
What's that? This?
Daff? Yeah.
Daff.
I told the Sheikh that. He was like, we've been dabbing before you were born, brother. It's like, love ball.
Mashallah.
Thanks so much for coming. Yeah, go.
The rhyme will be if 20 minutes. So I don't know.
It's cool. I'm tired of this point. But it's like I'm gonna say something dumb. I don't want to be about it. I like it's gonna, it's gonna be that. The last 30 minutes we just recorded Honda Sorties for Dogma Disrupted and for Yaqeen Institute, and we did it 2 hours, and he got a little loose last half hour. and so last half hour, like, all right, we have to edit anything out. It's like, so let's stop here and pause and so on.
See, as the content creator, this is where I capitalize.
Nice. Down. Beneficial, accept. Forgive me for any shortcomings that I have or mistakes that I made.
Honored. Thank you so much for coming.